Ebel Club. I think you're going to be speaking to them. The program chair is a big fan of this club too. So,
my name is Bob Zeman, 878. I was privileged to have a friend of mine visit me last week. He was in the Afghanistan government for 20 years here. For a while, he was Afghanistan president or ambassador to France and also to Canada. He knew all the people who were involved in the negotiations there, and he told me we talked for about 3 or 4 hours there. For those of you who are, I'll tell you a little bit of what he said. 11 of the 20 negotiators at the negotiations were former prisoners at Guantanamo. He said that the supreme leader has been in hiding because the last supreme leader was killed by a drone strike there, and so the supreme leader has not come out, although he thinks he's in Kandahar. He says that the Taliban is not unified at all. It's full of terrorist organizations, and we all know of Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, but there's other terrorists in there too, and that caused a big problem there. And he said the huge problem on our part was that we allowed Ghani, the president from 2010 to 2018, to leave by a private helicopter after ransacking the treasury and taking all the money. And so it left the country leaderless there. They went to the supreme military leaders, U.S. leaders, and they said no. They contacted Biden, and he said no, we don't want any more leadership there. And so therefore there was no leadership, and that's why Kabul fell. And he told me quite a bit more, but I don't have the time. His name is Omar Samad. If you want to look him up on the Google it there, and I'm sure somebody's probably doing it right now. Omarsamad.
I think you should invite Omar as a speaker.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we got a couple more guests in the back, and then we should be good to go.
Who am I missing? Eric?
Eric Flanders, 1162, and I brought my wife, Diane.
Welcome back, Diane. First to you, Jeff.
Jeff Holmes, 1148, and Yoko has asked me not to introduce her.
Welcome back, Yoko.
Hi, my name's Ken. I've been here many times. Thank you all for having me. My profession, I'm an adventure guide. My job title is actually adventure guide. I've been on a lot of adventures. I almost died my second time climbing Mount Fuji. I almost died on a Grand Canyon expedition once. I've done a lot of crazy things, but lately I'm on the most terrifying adventure of my life, online dating. So if anyone has a map or any advice, I'd be happy to take it. Yeah, it's a long story, but I was young and inexperienced, and I decided to go without any, so I missed the train I was supposed to take. I didn't, normally I would take a Japanese friend to help me navigate the train system and the signs, but I didn't, I was by myself. So I missed everything, and I couldn't get to the trail that I was going to take, but they said, well, if you wait 4 hours, you can take a different train to a different trail that I had not prepared for. I was like, I've only got 2 days off from work. All right, let's go. And I got there, so I was starting 4 or 5 hours late. I was young and in good shape, but I decided to run up the mountain. And I ran, and the path I was on turned out to be closed, so there were no support huts on the way up. And I got altitude sickness very, very badly. A windstorm came in. If you've ever had very bad altitude sickness, I mean, the headache I had, I literally wanted to drill a hole in my head. It was so bad. But I was too young and dumb to know that, hey, buddy, turn around. Just go back down. I just kept going up and up and up. And the windstorm came in, and I had to, I found a cubby hole in a rock that was just the size for me to, get my back in fetal position and pull my pack in behind me. And I passed out. And I don't know how long I was out, but I woke up. And the song Just Around the River Bend from the movie Pocahontas, Disney's Pocahontas movie, came into my head, and I woke up and I just thought, it's just around the river bend. So I start running along the trail. I got to the top of the volcano, and there was no one around. I was expecting to find a support hut, and there was a support hut, but it was closed for the season. So I see a map and it's in Japanese, and I can't read Japanese, so I think I know where I am, and I think I know where I'm trying to go. So I'm just going around the top of the volcano, and I see the most beautiful thing. After hours, I see the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. A lit up Coca-Cola machine. And I see it, and I'm crying, and I start running, and I didn't look at my feet. It was dark, obviously. I didn't have a headlamp. I start running, and I didn't know that the ground between me and the Coke machine dropped off, so I just fell and rolled down a steep, rocky, glassy hill. It was a whole thing. And then I got to the hut where I was supposed to be and vomited for about an hour until I had nothing left on my stomach. Passed out, woke up for the sunrise, and slid down the mountain, basically.
That's what happened to me with ayahuasca.
Did you get your Coke at least? I said, did you get your Coke at least? Fair enough.
If you've ever wanted to climb Fuji, there's a civilized trail that grandmothers take. There are 11 warming huts along the way. You can stop and get hot miso and support, and it doesn't have to be. But the weather can change. Bring warm clothes.
Lessons
Anyone?
learned. I think that should be everybody. All right. So I also want to give a special thanks of appreciation to our AV team. We have Rich Mayfield, who's working in there. Our current treasurer, past first VP, who's done a lot of the interviews, and he's going to be our president for next year. And then Phoebe Piper, longtime friend of the club, who's been incredibly helpful with our AV. So thank you, Phoebe, and thank you, Rich, for helping with that. I've also been told there was a set of glasses left on the bar. These belong to anybody? All right, fair enough. Well, they're up here if you need them. Something. You could try drinking off them. I don't know how much you get. And then before we get into the tonight's program, we have a very special opportunity and ceremony tonight, inducting a new member, which is always a great privilege. So we have here tonight our most recent member to be inducted, who we've immediately thrown into the deep end here. He's going to be stepping in as our second VP next year, so we put him right to work. But without further ado, I'm going to bring up Ken Hudson, one of Steve Whiteman's sponsors, to tell us a little bit about our new brother. So, Ken.
Evening, everybody. It's always a pleasure to see a new member being inducted. It means that we have life left in us and new interests. Everyone brings new things to the club. And so I met Steve at a tiki event, of all things. He came up and introduced himself to me. I was vending there selling some tiki stuff, and he came up and introduced himself to me, and we got talking, and he expressed an interest in finding out more about the club, and invited him up, and he started coming, and I think in fact, I'm certain he's been here more than I have in the last 3 months. Steve has a very adventurous spirit. He has no fear in going out and just doing things on his own, and going out and pursuing things that he wants to experience, and he seems up for just about anything. He also, when you talk about living off grid, he has a place in Arizona that I think is about as off grid as you can get, aside from living under a rock. I'm interested to find out more about that place one of these days. Ever since Steve showed up, he was always one of the earliest people here, and I know he helped out Bob quite a bit with some of the work that he was doing, and just someone who, from the very beginning, just started pitching in and doing a lot more than, frankly, a lot of our current members are willing to do. So, Steve, I very much appreciated. We've co-opted him pre-membership into becoming our second VP for next year. So, I'm looking forward to what he brings to that. From what I've seen so far, I think it's going to be a great addition. Steve, come on up.
Hi, I'm Steve Whiteman. I live over near Woodland Hills. in my 55 years of living on this earth, I've done a lot of things. Started out as a little kid, just as soon as I could ride a bike, I'd ride my bike 10 miles away, and my parents would go, I haven't seen Steve for 2 days. Where is he? But I've always been an adventurous person, traveled all around the world. I'm kind of a solo traveler. I like to do things on my own, even in my scuba diving. But I've been diving all over the world. I have friends all four corners of this planet. I make a lot of friends as I go, but I don't forget people. I'm always there to help people. I said, well, even if I don't become a member of this club, I'm still interested in coming and helping out and whatever you need help with. I'm very handy. I was a commercial contractor for almost 30 years here in the state of California mainly, and Los Angeles, working on a lot of high-profile projects. So I always see things past where they're at. I always have a vision of what's going on, what's going to happen. So I'm always quick to get around things that, problems that are arising or occurring. So to come here and help out the club, this is a walk in the park. I don't mind painting, fixing a toilet, whatever they need. I just want to keep this club going. It's a great club, a great group of people that come here, whether they're guests or members. I believe in what they want to do here and how they want to keep it going. So I'm willing to roll up my sleeves and help out any way I can. And that's just the way I am in life. But anyway, thank you. I won't take up the night. But
Steve, thank you. And your volunteer efforts have definitely not gone unnoticed. So we very much appreciate it. And we appreciate your, life of stories and history as an adventurer. We all benefit from that. And we're looking forward to learning more about you and your experience as you get more involved. So we have a few tokens to mark the occasion of you becoming a full-fledged member. First off, this certifies that Stephen Anthony Whiteman, who left the beaten path and made for adventure, has been admitted to companionship in the Adventurers Club as an active member at Los Angeles, California as of October 4th, 2021, member number 1229. So Steve. And then real quick, before we get the good photos, we also have your member badge, which you are now inclined to decorate however you see fit. There's a long history of guys painting all kinds of great designs on their badges. So yeah, so it's a high bar. And then your Adventurers Club member card for any of our reciprocal clubs all around the world. If you ever happen to wander through their doors.
I'll learn the secret handshake later.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, that's behind closed doors, of course. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you want to go in front of Matt? What's that? It's Jeff Holmes and myself. Yeah. There you go. They're scribbles. They're kind of hard to make out. We're having a competition for who can have the most scribbly signature. All right, and without further ado, we can jump into our program for the evening. I'd like to say, as I'm sure you've all picked up, it's so great to have such a diverse group of adventurers and people here with overlapping and intersecting life experience. This is what makes this club great, is all these different people from different parts of, life and adventure being here and sharing their experience. So I hope that after the program, you'll stick around and connect with each other and continue to share some of those experiences and stories. Without further ado, I would invite up our speaker for the evening, as well as our current First Vice President, Ken Hudson, for our evening program. Thank you both for being here.
Of Los Angeles, glad to have you tuning into us tonight. We have a great guest this evening, a longtime member. You're a 1081, is it?
1081.
So to put that in perspective, we've been around 100 years this year, and I'm above 2000, so Jim dates back a little bit.
23 years. Yeah.
Great. Jim is traveled a lot all over the world. I'm not sure where he stands as far as number of countries, but one of the things that he does is spend a lot of time with indigenous tribes. And that's a level of commitment that a lot of travelers don't really make. He's also an author, writes about a lot of his experiences. And so if you would, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I consider myself a cultural anthropologist, although I do not have a degree. It's all been my own interest in embedding myself in remote tribal cultures, especially those that have no written language. Probably visited about 100 around the world. And I've traveled extensively with a number of members from this club who got me interested in this. I've been doing this for about 30 years, and I absolutely love it. I've managed to turn it into a part-time living. And before we get really rolling here, I wanted to put a shout out that this happens to be our centennial. And even though we can't have a big celebration because of COVID, this is a pretty big accomplishment for a group of guys who have nothing in common. We all do something different here. There's no criteria for being a member of this club. So to stick together for 100 years, I think is pretty special. And this is my 27th program here in 23 years, and every time I'm up here, I am honored to be part of this brotherhood. I just want to put that out there.
Great. Well, we appreciate you coming out tonight to talk to us. I think our monitor is devoid of images at the moment.
It doesn't like me tonight.
Let me help you guys out real quick.
Okay.
Nothing?
Version.
This is like radio, no dead air.
Yeah.
Yes.
You guys gotta talk about something.
Okay, so you're going to talk about 4 different parts of the world tonight.
4 of my earlier expeditions, I decided to go with some of the older stuff because since I moved away from here 3.5 years ago, there have been over 100 new members who absolutely know nothing about what I've done. So I talked it over with some of the guys, and we decided to do some of the earlier expeditions. So there'll be 4 different ones. I see we're up on one screen. We're not over here yet.
You guys are gonna have to live with this one. Sorry.
That's good.
Okay.
That's good. We can go
We
with
can
that.
probably see that one better than
Sure, yeah. So are we live now?
that.
Okay.
We're good.
Ever since the drum beat.
Well, I called this the Darby Dragons because in the early days of exploration, when cartographers got to the end of the known world on their maps, that's what they put there, Darby Dragons. And that has caused a lot of paranoia and myths and legends over many centuries. And I feel that some of my expeditions have been falling off the map, so that's why I chose that title. And if we can begin with the first image here. We're going to begin in Ethiopia, in northeastern Ethiopia, right near the border of Eritrea, up there near the Red Sea. This is an expedition that was led by our own Dr. Rosalie Lopez, who is here tonight, who works at JPL, and she organized this because she wanted to study this rare shield volcano in the Ethiopian desert and make comparisons to one on Jupiter's moon of Io. So she brought along, there we are on the summit of the Urta volcano. She brought along 4 planetary scientists. Our own member Ken Freund was with us, my wife Irene, and myself, and a driver. So there were 8 of us in this expedition. Excuse me. This was a triple flag expedition. As you can see, we're carrying the flag of the Explorers Club there. And the next one should be our own Adventurers Club. And there's Ken and my wife holding that up, and we return that flag at a night of high adventure. And finally, the next shot would be the Society of Women Adventurers, the 3rd flag that we carried. Unfortunately, the Society of Women has gone under, but they were a viable force for 7 years. And so let's continue on here. This is the Urta. We're on our way to the Urta volcano, which is that big bump you see on the right side out there. It's only a 600-meter incline because this is a shield volcano, meaning it's a lake as opposed to a cone. And we drove from Addis Ababa several hours through the Danakil Depression. This is a desert where the temperature does not fall below 120 degrees day or night. Next shot, please. We started seeing camel caravans right away, and I found out on this journey that there are 12 million estimated camels in Ethiopia. Next. That more than any place on earth, and they run caravans 24/7. There are going to be a lot of camels in tonight's program from a lot of parts of Africa, so yeah, we can move ahead with this. Now, we're going into the land of the Afar. And there's two factions to these people. They live in this 120-degree desert with no trees for miles. They are the white Afar that you see here, and soon we will get into the red Afar, which is a totally different faction. Now, these guys are kind of assimilated into Western culture because they make their living by chopping salt from the desert floor. And then you'll see next that they pry it up in big slabs. One too many. There we go. They pry it up. Then they have to chop it into squares, and they load it onto camels. And if you're lucky enough to be in the desert under a full moon at night, you will see the next shot. You will see scenes like this. These caravans run 24/7. They never stop. Salt is still money in this part of Africa. And there was a great military presence here of the Ethiopian army because we're right on the border of Eritrea, and at that time, they were still lobbing shells at each other over the border. We passed a lot of burned out armor vehicles. So we made a stop at this point for me to go along with Rosalie to photograph some mineral lakes. And my wife stayed behind in the car. We figured it was safe because there's a lot of Ethiopian soldiers around. So we took off for about a half hour. When I came back, there was a lot of commotion around our car. I saw these soldiers running around waving their rifles, and I thought, what's going on? What happened while I was gone? Next, please. Well, what happened was these guys had never heard of or seen an iPod, and they couldn't believe that their national hero, Bob Marley, lived in that little box. So in the half hour I was gone, my wife had half the Ethiopian army dancing to Bob Marley in the desert. But to continue on, this is the village of Dodom, and this is an occupied village that is in this desert. It's occupied year-round. And this is the Red Afar who live out here. Now, they're quite different. In 1935, the great travel writer Wilfred Thesiger wrote that the Afar are murderous thugs who kill anyone who enters their land. I actually have a newspaper clipping from the LA Times marked 1953 referring to them castrating people who entered their land. Today, they have complete autonomy from Ethiopia and Eritrea because they believe that this tribe single-handedly keeps Al-Qaeda from crossing the Red Sea from Yemen into the Horn of Africa. So naturally, these are the guys we went to go hire as our security. Next, please. So we got there and we paid money and we contracted with these guys. You can see they're all heavily armed. There was an abundance of Kalashnikov rifles there. Everybody had one, including the next fellow, I believe. And we made a contract. We had to hire 8 gunmen to escort us up their volcano because there were 8 of us in our group. And they guaranteed our safety from bandits, which I thought was a little ironic since they themselves are bandits and thugs.
From other bandits.
And you'll see in the next shot, they also had a sense of humor since they gave us these no machine gun stickers to put in our windows. So anyway, they determined that it was a little hot to climb during the day in 120, so they put us in these next huts where the temperature was 142, we recorded, to wait for the sun to go down so we could climb a 600-foot volcano. Now, when the sun set, everybody gathered, and my wife had just lost an eye, a back one there. Just stay there for a while, please. My wife had lost an eye about 2 weeks before this trip, and so she had no depth perception. So we decided she was going to ride a camel while the rest of us were climbing on foot. And I normally have no trouble doing this on an expedition. I've been on many. But we took off, my wife on a camel. We each had our armed gunmen with us, and within a half hour, I was the last one in line, falling further and further behind. I'm having trouble breathing. And about an hour later, I realized I'm all alone on the side of this volcano. Everybody else is long gone. And I collapsed near the summit. I thought I was having a heart attack. I couldn't breathe. And I remember feeling this volcano moving underneath me. I'm looking up at every star in the heaven. And I thought, if I'm going to die, this is where I want to do it. This is beautiful. I do not want to die in a hospital. I've always said that. And this is what I'm actually thinking at this point, when suddenly I'm being prodded by a rifle barrel. I thought, well, okay, maybe shot is not real big on my list either, but he decides this was my gunman who came back down from the summit. When he realized I wasn't there, he found me, he got me to my feet, and he helped me up to the summit. Now we can take a look inside the volcano. There's 2 shots, which is all I got to take before my camera got fried. And at that point, next shot here, please. They put me into this grass hut where my wife Irene was waiting for me. She was frantic because I was hours late and it's almost sunrise now and I'm just getting up to the summit. So I go inside this hut to try and get some rest, and the last thing I remember thinking is, who in their right mind is putting a grass hut at the top of a fiery volcano? So I crawled inside, and no sooner did we get in there than I hear everybody yelling, let's go, we got to get out of here, let's move. So the next couple of shots are just me running around trying to photograph people. You can see that's my guide, Musa. You can see he's even wearing hand grenades on his belt. This guy was hardcore. And then this Ken Freund and I holding the club flag with some of our gunmen. We are on the summit of the volcano. We're getting ready to haul down. Now, that's Irene in the front. It's daylight now, and she's decided with one eye she can negotiate this trail during the day. There is no trail per se, but you can see it's all igneous rock, and our camp is beyond that horizon about 6 miles away. So we start down on foot. Hold it right there. We start down on foot, and 3 shots ring out. Irene and I dive for cover, along with our gunmen. And being igneous rock, it shredded our skin like coral. But we're laying on the ground because there is no cover. And after a couple of minutes, our guy Musa stands up and he goes, okay, let's get out of here. He's trying to move us. Well, Irene stands up, and she fell over. My first thought was she's been shot. No, her foot was caught in a crevasse, and she twisted her ankle so she could not walk. Well, at this point, you can see that the camel guy, the drover, had come down from the summit. We had a quick negotiation. I offered him the sun and the moon to get my wife on the camel and get her out of there because we didn't know who was shooting or why. And so, next shot here is her getting up on a camel. We smacked it on the butt, the camel, not her. And she went trotting down the volcano, and thank God we got her out of there. I continued on in foot. For about another 5 miles back to camp. I was the last one in. I was hours late. I'm gasping for air, but I've decided I'm not having a heart attack. I don't have any pain. I don't know what the problem is, but there's no medevac out here, so suck it up. I get back to camp, and I collapsed into a fetal position because my electrolytes were shot. Now, my memory is a little hazy at this point, but I do remember Ken forcing some Gatorade down my throat. Dry powdered Gatorade, and that revived me enough. They helped me get into the Land Rover. I remember people yelling. I was waiting for more gunshots, and we peeled out of there because it turned out that I stiffed the guy on the fee for the camel to get my wife down the mountain. So we continued on this trip for several more days. In fact, by then I was just feeling normal again, little trouble breathing, but nothing special. Irene was limping around on a sore leg, but we had an Explorers Club dinner to go to in New York, which we did. When we came back from that, we're still feeling a little lousy. So she went to the doctor and found out she had a broken leg and had been walking on it for 3 weeks and ended up 6 weeks in a walking boot. I, on the other hand, had deep vein thrombosis. I had blood clots in my lungs, so I should have died on the way up to the volcano, let alone everything that happened after. It took me a year to recover from that. Next shot, please. This is a medical emergency in the field. Duct tape to the rescue, no matter what. We always have duct tape around. This was the only thing we could do for her feet. And then we continued on. Next. Now this is the flag of the Afar Democratic National Front, the Red Afar, the same faction of Afar that took us up the mountain. I learned about 2 months after this expedition by an article in Business Week of all places that 7 trekkers had been taken up to the summit of Ale volcano where they slept in the same huts we were in. They were summarily pulled out and executed in the middle of the night by the Red Afar. And they claimed responsibility for that assassination. Why they took us up and honored their commitment to us, I have no idea. Why they killed those people and not us, we have no idea. No one will probably ever know. They can certainly make more money taking trekkers up to see their volcano than they can just murdering us in the desert. But that just is, goes to show that if you're going to pursue adventure and exploration, it's always a roll of the dice if you're going to come home alive. So we're going to move on to the next journey here. Now, I've been showing you a lot of old shots of my wife, and that's not fair because she doesn't look like that anymore. I shot this of her 2 weeks ago in Iceland. Many of you know Irene. And she wanted to be here tonight. We didn't have a dog sitter, so she sent this little hello along to all of our friends here. And next, please. We're moving into West Africa here, into Mali. And this is a trip that I made with Pierre Odier, who I believe is number 988. Next, please. We went into the Southern Sahara. We began in the capital city of Bamako. We went through the Bandiagara escarpment. We spent time with the Dogon people. But to move on, for the purpose of this trip, it actually began in Timbuktu, a place that most people thought for many years was the most isolated city on earth. And I still have people ask me if such a place exists. Well, yes, it does. And as you can see from this next shot, it is a city made entirely of mud. And the next one also will show you that the roofs are full of satellite dishes and TV antennas, and they actually have internet cafes. But Timbuktu is in danger, it always has been, of being swallowed by the harmattan, which is the hot wind that blows from the east to the west. And this is what causes the great Saharan sandstorms. And if it reaches the Atlantic Ocean, it's what becomes the big hurricanes and tornadoes that strike the east coast of the United States. This is the harmattan that comes out of Mali that does this. Next shot, please. So we were passing through Timbuktu. We were going into the Southern Sahel about 120 miles north. So this is what the Sahara looks like out there. There's no roads, hour after hour, including this next one. This is the landscape. This is all you will see for many hours if you cross the Sahara. But we eventually got to our destination, which is this village called Erawan. At one point, there was an American entrepreneur who actually started a hotel out there for tourists, and his big claim to fame was that Humphrey Bogart stayed there. I don't know if that's true or not. But until 1964, this was a Foreign Legion outpost, and in 64, Mali got its independence from France. So the Legion moved out, and these next gentlemen moved in. These are the blue men of the Sahara. These are Tuaregs. This is the tribal Tuaregs. They are Berber nomads. And yes, they do wear blue from head to toe, but they got their name because this indigo comes from the ink of sea urchins, and it's toxic. And when they wear these robes long enough, it permeates the pores of the skin and literally turns their skin blue, which is why they've been called the blue men for centuries. Next, please. They are fierce desert warriors. They always have been. They're heavily armed at all times. That fellow's carrying a knife that now hangs in my den. And let's see the next shot here. For 2,000 years, the Tuaregs have operated the Trans-Saharan Camel Caravans that run 24/7. They run as many caravans in West Africa as there were in East Africa. And these guys, besides the salt, they also hold gold and slaves. Now, there are slaves in Africa, particularly in the salt mines around Mauritania, where this caravan came from. They're simply called indentured servants today, but they are slaves. So if we continue for the next slide here, you can see that this caravan was about 300 camels strong. And they were headed from somewhere up in southern Morocco down to Timbuktu, where all of their salt would be transferred out into port cities like Mopti and Dakar. And this next shot will show you, these guys are hauling 200-pound slabs of salt, 2 of them each on each side of them. That's about 800 pounds. So a quick word about camels. These are the perfect work animal. They're hauling all this weight. They will walk 30 to 40 miles a day. They'll drink water once every 2 weeks. They'll drink 100 gallons when they drink. They don't store it in their hump. That is fat that they live on when there's nothing to eat. They have a nictitating membrane on their eye and extra long lashes that they can shut in a sandstorm and still see. They can close a nose valve. The pads of their feet will expand on soft sand to give them traction. On rocks, it will contract and act like a vibram sole. If there's no food, they'll eat rocks and they'll eat tree twigs to fill their stomach. When the camel drops, its drovers will butcher it and eat it on the spot, and they will use its hide. Nothing is wasted of these animals. They'll make tools out of their bones. It is the perfect animal for the desert.
Some incentive to keep moving.
Incentive to keep moving. And we passed a lot of dead camels out there, by the way. So anyway, next here. Yeah, at night they bed them down, and they take all the weight off, and we hobble them. We hobble their front legs so they can't wander away. Because the Tuaregs believe that if a camel wanders off, it will turn into a person. And the person will come back and haunt them. The Tuaregs are very superstitious people. And I'll get into that in just a second. Next shot, please. So we're there to ride with these guys. Pierre and I wanted to immerse ourselves into their culture and become part of the tribe. So here I am, I'm mounted up, and I'm ready to head off into the 7th century, becoming a desert nomad. But I'm having to wait for my guy in this next photo. This is my guide, Colliers, who couldn't find his Oakley sunglasses, and he was busy on his cell phone calling his broker, so that's what's holding up the expedition. But you'll see that he's wearing a medallion, which is very similar to this one right here. And I'll talk about this a little bit later, because this is a passport in the Sahara Desert. So Colliers took me and Pierre, and his brother Mahmoud was our driver. And we left from Tidemi on camels to make a wide arcing circle on our way back to Timbuktu. Here we are riding through the Sahara. We visited a number of nomad camps along the way. This is pretty typical of housing in the Sahara Desert, made from whatever detritus you can find out there. But if you see from this shot here, inside these are very comfortable little homes. There are intricate jigsaw puzzles, and it's the job of the women to construct these and take them down. This whole, you can back up one, please. Yeah, the women take these apart and put them together. You can see each piece is hand-tied. They're a very intricate puzzle. They're very comfortable, and that entire hut will sit on top of a camel. Now, in this next shot, we're being paid a great honor because this Tuareg man has taken off his headgear, which is called a taglamust. Now, the Tuaregs believe evil spirits enter through the ears, nose, and throat. The men believe this, the women do not. That's why the men wrap their heads and cover their faces except for their eyes, and the women go about uncovered. So unlike most Muslim countries, there I had a lot of interaction with the women. They served food, they sat in with conversations with us, and they handled all the money. Anytime I wanted to buy something, I would have to sit outside in the sand with a little lady who would pull out a solar-powered calculator and tell me exactly how much in dollars she wanted for everything I wanted to buy. Because the women control everything among the Tuaregs. So that's what's happening in this little scene here, and we'll move on, please. Now, when you meet the head man, you make small talk, and then you're expected to drink tea. Now, the Tuaregs drink tea 24/7. Actually, to me, it was sugar with a little tea in it. They drink more sugar than Canadians, and they brew it nonstop. They look for any excuse to stop riding and stop and make a cup of tea. So after you've made your small talk and you've had 20 or 30 cups of tea, like I'm having in this next picture here, I think, I was jacked up on sugar the entire time I was in the Sahara. They drink it in those little shot glasses. So after you've done all of that, inevitably, they're going to trot out one of their daughters just in case they need a wife. Next shot. Whoops, I'm a little ahead of myself. This was just, yeah, okay. Yeah, the other was just taking a break along the way. These guys would stop and brew tea. So anyway, then the headman will always have a daughter he wants to marry off, and she would very happily go for the cost of a couple of sheep or a cow. And that's just the way things are out there. There's no ceremony. She simply becomes your wife for a night if you want, or for permanent. I've always managed to be very diplomatic in these situations and turn them down, because my actual wife, Irene, gets real upset when I bring extra wives home on these trips. So to continue here, please. We were never allowed to live inside the yurts with families. They all had these windbreaks outside for us, and you can see that this one is covered with a camel hide, which is the mark of a wealthy family. So we would just lay down these mats at night, and we'd slept in the sand, rolled up in our robes, and that's how we traveled for approximately 150 miles on camels. And next. Now everybody always asks how we get water. Well, there's enough water under the Sahara to turn it into a garden, believe it or not, but it's about 300 feet deep. And a man cannot lift a bucket that much. So what they do is they throw a pigskin bag down, they fill it up, and they attach a rope with these pulley systems to a camel who will back up and pull the water up for them. And these are wells like this throughout the Sahara Desert, all the way from Morocco to Timbuktu. And next shot, please. So this is Halis, and we're riding back into Timbuktu now after I don't know how many days in the desert, and I told him how much I'm looking forward to calling my wife. I haven't spoken to her in days. And so he pulls this satellite phone out of his bag and he says, "What's her number?" He was a pretty tuned in Tuareg. So anyway, you might notice in the background it's a little blurry because a couple minutes after I took this shot, we were hit by a sandstorm. Halis Qabli gets off his camel. We make them both kneel down. We squat between them and cover their heads with our robes. The sandstorm hits us. It sounds like a freight train racing over us. And I'm talking to my wife in Los Angeles, squatting between two camels in the middle of a Saharan desert sandstorm. That was very cool. And when that passed, we rode into Timbuktu. And we just get to the city gates, and there's this guy standing there with a big telephoto lens. And he's about to take our picture. He looks like an ad for REI the way he's dressed. And I've never done anything like this before. I did it on the spur of the moment reaction. When I saw him raising his camera to me, I raised up on my camel and I went, "No photo, kadu." You all know what that means. You've all run into that in your travels. I don't know why I did it, but now Halis is giggling because he knows what I'm doing. So the guy pulls out a bill and he hands it to me. And I make a big show. I'm holding it up to the light. I'm snapping it. I tasted it. I stick it in my robes and I go, "Take photo," like this. And the guy starts snapping away. Now Halis is just openly laughing, and we ride by this guy. And I felt really bad for him because he thought he got this National Geographic shot of these lords of the desert, and he's never going to know that I was just a middle-aged white guy from LA. So to continue on now, I was awarded Adventurer of the Year for this trip. Now, Pierre was with me every step of the way on this trip. I want to acknowledge that. Why he did not get this trophy? Because the 2 years prior, he got it back to back. So I got the consolation prize on the third year, even though Pierre should have shared this one with me. This was 2009 Adventurer of the Year. So let's continue on to the next trip. We're going to change gears, and I'm going to take you into Southeast Asia, into Cambodia to be exact, and around the city of Siem Reap to be a little more exact. Now in this next shot, the gentleman you see there in the fatigues is named Bill Morse. He's number 1140, a member of our club. He was a very successful businessman in Palm Springs. He and his wife Jill sold everything they owned, their house, their businesses, and everything, and they moved to Cambodia to assist the gentleman there in the green shirt, who's named Akira, who blows up landmines for a living. Now, he's a Khmer national, and he runs the only all-Khmer demining operation in the country. Now, he was taken from the jungle as a small child by the Khmer Rouge. Next, please. And that little guy sitting on that seat there is Akira in a Khmer Rouge commune. He was made into a child soldier, next shot, and his job was to lay landmines. That's Aki on the left. So he laid landmines. He doesn't know how old he was because there's no written records, but he did that for several years. When he was approximately 14, he was captured by the invading Vietnamese army, conscripted and made to lay landmines. When he was approximately 19, invading Vietnamese left Cambodia, and he was drafted into the Khmer Army. So by the time he's 20, he's a combat veteran of 3 separate armies and one of the leading demolition experts in Southeast Asia. But he had an epiphany. He realized what he had done as a child, and he was trying, the UN wanted to recruit him to start demining operations in Southeast Asia, but he did not want to work for anyone anymore. He wanted to atone for what he had done as a child. So if we go on here, you can see that what he did was he became something like a biblical mendicant. He wandered from village to village with a pair of leathermen asking people if they had any mines they knew of, and he would disarm them one at a time by himself. He told me he estimates he had deactivated 10,000 of these anti-personnel mines himself over the years. Now, he was trying, the big NGOs like the Halo Trust that you've probably all heard of, they charge tens of thousands of dollars to go in and clear a village of mines. Akira has never charged anyone a dime. His operation has been growing huge over the years, and I'll get into that in a minute. But these big NGOs tried to force him out because he was an independent. They called him a cowboy. They tried to get the government to ban him. So he went to school, he got certified, he got licensed. And next, please. He admits to having post-traumatic stress, and rightfully so. He has to get away quite often. He prefers to live in the bush as opposed to a city. And if we go on here, you will see that in 2010, CNN chose him as one of their heroes. They brought him to Los Angeles, where he was my guest, and along with Bill, Bill, the administrator of the whole operation. And on Thanksgiving evening 2010, on international CNN News, Akira was awarded his, next please, he was awarded his Hero Award, presented by Renee Zellweger of all people. And Aki had no idea who or what she was. He's never seen a movie. And I'll tell you a great story about him later regarding her. And next, the following year, he won the Manhae Peace Prize from South Korea. So at this point, he's a player on the world stage. And he gets major funding now from our State Department, from the State Departments of Australia and New Zealand, and he runs the only all-Khmer mining operation. So this is when he invited me to come over and see things. If we move on. And there I am, getting ready to go into the minefields. I'm signing paperwork where to ship my body. And the next slide will show we are going into the minefields here together. Now, anywhere you step in Cambodia, if it's not asphalt, you're liable to get your ass blown off, and that's just a fact. There is unexploded ordnance everywhere. But Cambodia only ranks 7th in the world for landmine saturation, believe it or not. And they estimate there are still 11 million landmines there. But as you can see next here, that's an old Chinese hand grenade with a tripwire on a tree left from the Vietnam War, unexploded mortar rounds. And this is just one day's take from working in the minefields. They find this explosive nonstop out there. The whole ground is saturated. Particularly during the Nixon administration, we carpet bombed Cambodia with plastic landmines that are undetectable. They do have these sophisticated detectors like this, but as you can see from the next shot, they work in extremely harsh conditions where it's 90 to 100 degree heat and matching humidity. And if they get a hit, no matter what it is, they don't know if it's a coin, a nail, or a landmine. So they have to stop and physically dig up every piece they get on a hit. So this next shot will show you, they put down this 3-foot grid of red tape. They cut away all the foliage and they clear away everything that get out of the way. And then they have to go in with a knife from the side and probe. Physically probe. You can't go in from the top because it only takes 10 pounds of pressure to detonate an anti-personnel mine. That's about as much as it takes for you to push a doorbell. So this next shot, I think, is Aki is showing me a Chinese-made anti-personnel mine here. So he's no longer allowed to blow them up by himself the way he likes to disarm them. So what they do, if we move on, there's a company here in Southern California that collects unexploded ordnance around the world, and they turn it into reconstituted TNT that they provide Akira with free of charge. He'll put a little bit of this next to a mine with a detonator. He'll use a remote, like is in the next shot here. And then the next one is blowing the mine in place. And that's what he does day in and day out. Now, to continue on, these guys live in the field for days, if not weeks at a time. They live on whatever they can catch and whatever they can kill. The first day I got there, they had just caught this tree snake. And the next shot, I believe, is a young heron. And so the next shot will show that with a little wild onion and river water, that was lunch and dinner for the next 2 days. Tree snake, heron, and onions. So these guys sleep in hammocks at night, so there's no snakes that can bother them. And let's move on here. The next, about half of these deminers are young women. For one thing, they make about 4 times the national average in wages. And when they go into town, they are treated like rock stars. They don't ever buy a drink in their life. And if we keep going here, this is Bill and Aki and I in the minefields in our completely useless body armor that we were required to wear. That would not stop a rock if it had to. And the last shot, I believe, is one of several demining teams that are in the field 24/7 now. Akira directs the mining operations. Bill is the administrator. And the second in command is that little woman on the left side there. Her name is, I can't think of her name right now, excuse me, if Bill's watching, which he probably is. It's the middle of the night in Cambodia, but I have a feeling Bill's watching this. Anyway, this was the demining team that I went out with. And let's carry on to the next shot here. That was the end of that show. This is going to be the last place I'm going to take you, into north central Tanzania, up near the Manyara Highlands, if you can see that, south of Ngorongoro. If any of you have ever seen that old movie, The Gods Must Be Crazy, those are the San people of Namibia, and they speak a Khoisan click language, like. Anyway, about 400 years ago, half of them migrated to what is today modern-day Tanzania, where they became the Hadza people, or Hadzabe. And this is where they live, in the Manyara Highlands. There's about 3,000 Hadzabe, surrounded by 300,000 Maasai. And they formed a symbiotic relationship. Now, if you look at that photo, that big ridge on the left side is the Great Rift Wall. And on the right of that saddle is the southern caldera of Ngorongoro Crater, and this is the homeland now of the Hadzabe. So let's continue on here. They are nomadic. If they make a kill, they will locate the entire clan to it. Now, I was provided a driver by our own Alan Feldstein's Infinite Safari Adventures for this journey, and the driver, we drove all night through a heavy rain. And he dropped me off in this big field, and he just pointed in that general direction because we don't know where these people are. They are nomads. Out of the 3,000 Hadzabe that live there, there are about 300 that have maintained the lifestyle of hunter-gatherers. They're literally cave people. These are what I wanted to see. And I found those grass huts they had made, which told me it was really raining hard that night, or they wouldn't even have bothered with making those temporary shelters. So I continued on a little further, and I came to this Juju Tree, which is the voodoo soul of the Hadzabe village that I was looking for. This tree was covered with goo from blood and gore over years, and they hung it with the skulls of their kills, and at night they would put their bows and arrows on it to take the power from the animals they had shot. So the next shot should show a little close-up of some of that. The main part of their diet is baboon, and that's very important. That's coming up here. So next, please. So kept wandering a little bit, and I came upon these women who were totally oblivious to me. So I just started taking photos. And you'll see that this one young lady there is wearing a nice beaded headpiece. Next, please. Now, these Hadzabe are not technically sophisticated people. They don't do beadwork. They don't do metal work. They contract with the Maasai to get their jewelry and their beads, and they contract with another tribe called the Barbeg, who are metal workers, to get spear tips and knives and things. So they all live in harmony in this one giant highland area. But this young lady started following me around, and it took me a few minutes to think, whoa, I think maybe she's flirting, and I need to get out of here before I get an arrow in my back. So I just took off, and I started climbing up a ridge. And when I got to the top, this is what I saw here. Next shot. I thought I was looking at first man. Next one. These guys, oh, I think we skipped one. Or not, no, my mistake, okay. Let's go back one. They had a small fire going, and when they saw me, they kicked out the fire, and they motioned for me to come up close and watch. And you can see here they started making a second fire. They put a bush knife down on the ground with a little kindling and a fire starter, and in the next shot you'll see they used friction, and they started a fire. So they kicked that fire out, and they motioned for me to do it. So they're testing me here. Okay,
See if you're a fast learner.
Yeah. Next shot is me. Took 3 tries. I made fire. Great. Just like Tom Hanks, not quite. Okay, so moving on to the next one. At this point, they bring out the pipe. Now, smoking ganja is an accepted entree to many of these remote societies I've visited all around the world. It is just a way of life. What I did not know at the time, if we can go to the next one here, is that these guys smoked around the clock. They smoked enough to kill Willie Nelson, and I could not possibly participate with them. I was there to observe. But if I hadn't smoked with them, I would not have been allowed into their village. So I got high, and at that point, they started grabbing bows and arrows, as you will see. So things are getting a little dangerous at this point. The next one shows me, stoned out of my mind, trying to shoot a bow and arrow. So now I made fire, I shot a bow and arrow, I smoked dope, and they said, cool, let's go hunt. Basically, I mean, we didn't have any language. It was all body language and hand signals. Well, they took off like jackrabbits, and the only way I could follow them was because it had rained so much the night before. I'm following their tracks, and before I knew it, I'm all alone. But every now and then, one of them would pop up out of the bushes. I never heard any of them, but I saw them, and they're giving me hand signals, telling me which way to go. So I thought, this is cool. They're watching me. I just want to get to wherever they're going in time to record a kill. So the next shot, yeah, these are the metal tips they get from the Barbeg people, but they dig a root and they boil it to get this neurotoxin that they cure their arrow tips with. And these guys are incredible shots. They're barely 5 feet tall. Their bows are 6 to 7 feet long, and I could hardly pull one. I think one of their bows would drop an elephant. Next shot. This guy wearing the crown of baboon here was the clan leader, and I watched him drop a bird in flight with a wooden-tipped arrow. That's how good these guys are. So anyway, I'm following them. And I hear nothing for quite a while, and there's no more hand signals. And suddenly, there's a big commotion in front of me, no more than 20 feet away. and this enraged baboon breaks cover right in front of me. Not this baboon, this is just a baboon. I was busy crapping my pants at the time to take a photo of a baboon because he could easily kill me. A baboon stands 3 to 4 feet tall and has 6-inch fangs, and he will tear a man limb from limb. But before I have any time to be afraid, this baboon is on the ground, twitching, because the neurotoxins is killing him. He has 2 arrows in him, and only then do I realize there's a Hadzabe on either side of me with another arrow knocked in their bow. They had covered me the entire time, and not only that, it took me a few minutes for this to sink in. They had maneuvered me to where they knew this baboon was hiding and used me as bait so he would attack me and they could kill it. So now I'm going through a range of emotions at this point. I realize I could have just been torn apart by a wild animal, and I'm thinking, how cool is it that I've just been on a hunt with a bunch of cavemen? And then it finally occurred to me that I just got the best friggin' travel story I've ever had. So I came home and I wrote this story, and I won an international prize for that, believe it or not. So let's continue on. They field dressed the baboon on the spot. They cut off the head. They dressed out the body. They smeared my face with blood to show I was part of the hunt. And as you can see, they don't waste a thing. They eat the meat. They threw the entire skin carcass on a fire, and they seared it, and I had to eat the first piece. Tasted like crap. I'd never eat it again, but I had to do it. And I think the next shot is the last one I took. Actually, one of them took it. I showed them how to work my camera. So that's me with all my homeboys there in Tanzania. And this story actually ends about 2 months later when I read a report from Stanford University that they released a paper in 2007 in which they declared that this particular hunter-gatherer clan of Hadzabe were one of 3 distinct genetic groups from which all of mankind is descended. Now, if that's true, I don't know, but if it is, my own ancestors set me up as bait on a baboon hunt.
So who's evolved?
Yes, who's the caveman? So that's pretty much my program tonight, but it was pretty intense. So I like to end with a few lighthearted things. So let's slowly go through the next few shots here, because I like to take photos of unusual things when I travel. Like, you're never going to see this on the 405 freeway. And I loved shots like this. Like, these guys are taking home some firewood and taking a few turkeys to market. Now, you have to wear a helmet on a motorbike, but it doesn't say what kind. This is a parking lot in Tel Aviv. Now, this is one of my favorites. This is the New York subway. Now, not only is this guy an elder from Papua New Guinea, but he's on his cell phone, and the best part of this is that still women are totally oblivious to him because this is New York. And this is the last and my favorite shot. This was a little boy in Benin. These guys wear these shirts trekkers give them. They have no idea what it says. And his says, I gave up drinking, smoking, and sex. It was the worst 15 minutes of my life. So the last shot here are a couple of my books, which are available here tonight if you'd like. They'll be for sale out there. I'll sign them. I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. And I thank all of you very much for being here tonight to listen to me talk.
So, Jim, quick question before we get into the questions.
Sure.
Where would people go to find your books or information about you? Your websites, or where can they look?
JamesDorsey.com is my website. The book with the big V on it is available through Lulu.com, which I know you probably forget about. Baboons for Lunch was from a much bigger publisher, and it's available on Amazon. And I will find out next week if my agent has sold my 4th book for publication or not. So hopefully there'll be another one coming out soon.
And can you tell us just a little bit about that without?
Actually, the next book is completely about my journey through the Sahara Desert with the Tuaregs. It's a whole narrative arc, about a month spent in the desert with these people.
Wow. I look
These
forward to
two
that.
books are collections of short stories from all over the world. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, thank you. Okay.
Questions,
Shall we take some
anybody?
questions?
Since the hall we're in is named after this gentleman's family.
And he is also my neighbor.
It's actually named after him.
Jim, quickly, back to camels. What's the average age of a camel in its working life, and actually how long do they typically live?
Working life maybe 40, and can live 60.
Wow.
Pretty hardy beasts, yes.
Hi, thank you for a great talk. Can you describe the passport?
You may have noticed that Halis was wearing a golden one. He is an aristocrat. His robes were tinted with gold that sets him apart from the average Tuareg. This was presented to me by him, and if you have to wear this in the desert, and basically this says the village I am from, and if I need assistance, it must be rendered to me. And so the Tuaregs all wear these. He had a gold one. He presented me with a silver one. It's one of my cherished items today.
Did you travel by yourself in Tanzania, or who was taking the pictures?
Mostly those guys were taking the pictures. I showed them how to use my camera, but I also have this great little bungee system that I can wrap around a tree twig and put a timer on my camera and take shots like that. But a lot of those shots were taken by those guys, so yeah.
So you traveled by yourself on that trip?
Yeah, Alan Feldstein had a driver for me, and he arranged some accommodations, but it was me out there, just me.
I noticed so many dogs in that last group that can you talk a little bit about that? Did everybody have a dog?
Everybody has a dog. They're not pets. They don't feed them. They're on their own. They will help track animals, but they don't train them. They're feral.
So they get a share of the hunt?
They do, yeah.
Amazing talk. Thank you so much. I have two questions. One, about how many people were in this touring tribe, approximately. And the second one is, I'm curious about your gear. So in all these pictures, I don't see for me, I carry a hiking pack. So you arrived with what gear and what kind of camera? You know, DSLR, an iPhone, what were you using? I
usually have 3 Canon Rebels. And I also have a tiny little Canon point and shoot that I do videos with. I just try to keep that stuff out of shots. I carry a small pack, not much, usually a shoulder bag. I don't like backpacks for some reason. You know, I was a mailman for many years, way back when, and I got used to a shoulder bag, and I still use one. I travel very light. I live on the food that I have in the village. Mostly that's rice and goat. You can get spaghetti anywhere in the desert. Everybody has spaghetti. Other than that, I carry a big bag of trail mix and power bars because I can't afford to eat exotic foods and get sick in these places. There's no way out. There's no medevacs. So I draw the line at monkey brains and eyeballs and that kind of stuff.
Did you eat any camel while you were there?
Yes, I've eaten a lot of camel.
What does it taste like?
Tough and stringy. I like horse better. Horse tastes like roast beef. I just ate horse last week in Iceland.
Jeff Holmes, 1148. Thanks, Jim, for mentioning all the other members you traveled with. They're so special to us. And that really meant a lot to me. Secondly, we have many guests here tonight, and many of you eventually will probably make it to Siem Reap in Cambodia. And you'll see the ruins, and there's yoga now. But not on the top of the list of most travelers is the Landmine Museum. And when you show up there, there'll probably be a cash box. And I encourage you to put a lot of money in there because besides the landmines and Aki, a number of members of this club, a number of people also invest in schools around that part of Cambodia. And it means the world to those people right now. And the third thing, last thing is, you talked about a little bit, you know, everybody just assumes, oh, you're a great adventurer. You're just born that way. But you told me a long time ago, like many of us, including me, you got a job to support your travel. And can you talk a little bit about how you had a job to support your adventure?
I carried mail for 30 years. And that gave me 6 weeks paid vacation every year, and I was also allowed to take another month without pay. So I was traveling. My wife has been on most of my expeditions with me. She's a tough core cookie, I'll tell you. And we've traveled the world like that together. Now, once I started getting very serious about this, I started selling my articles and wrote my first book, and I've probably published about 800 essays and articles about my travels. So that's provided a good deal of the money that keeps funding these. I've never had any corporate sponsorship. I've always paid for my own trips. And I make my money by writing about it later. But yeah, to go back to the thing in Cambodia, Bill and Akira and also Pierre Odier, they build and maintain dozens of schools there. And they have taken in orphans, they take care of them. Bill's wife Jill runs schools and cares for orphans. And these guys have become major philanthropists. If it was up to me, they'd get the Nobel Prize tomorrow.
They're not rich people.
What's that?
Pierre and others are not rich people.
They're not rich people. Pierre's a retired school teacher. But these guys have built probably 20 schools together. So if you're interested in that, look up the, oh God. Anyway, you just Google Bill Morse or Akira, and it'll take you into their websites where you can help them out if you feel so inspired. Anybody else there?
And the people who work at the museum are, many of them are victims of landmines themselves.
Yes.
They are missing a limb.
Yeah, I mean, if you go to almost any temple in Southeast Asia, you're going to pass an impromptu band on the trail of landmine victims. Nobody begs. They make music for money. You'll see blind, missing arms, missing legs. Some of them make instruments out of their legs and arms. I mean, it's incredible. But they don't beg for money. They play music for it. And that's very common there. Yes?
Yeah, hi. Regarding the landmines, actually, I've seen some studies and I've heard of some small charities that have been coming around talking about training rats actually to find the landmines and then using robotic. Okay, everybody's laughing.
We know that guy.
We
have a member involved.
That's real.
Yes.
We have a member involved in that.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I was curious, is that a thing? I mean, is that
Yes, it is. They're unusually large rats. They come from Tanzania, where they are specifically chosen and trained to do this because they do not weigh enough to detonate a mine, but they will sniff it out like a dog, and when they find one, they'll sit down on it.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. It's like that.
And they don't live very long, so they're constantly training them. I mean, not because they're blowing up, but they just have a short lifespan. It's like, oh, another rat, bring them out. No. Yes, but they are using rats now.
Oh, okay. Well,
But they still have to probe. They still have to go in with a knife and probe until they hit metal.
We could just get them to dig them out. That would be a step.
Yeah. So it looks like that's it.
How did you begin writing and selling stories? What was the process there?
That'd be hard to describe. The first story, well, first of all, I collected rejection slips for about 2 years, way back when, and then I happened to sell a story to a now defunct magazine called California Wild, published out of San Francisco. It was about a kayaking trip among a pod of orcas. And it was then I did this and then I did that. So what I did was I decided I wanted to take a year and learn how to write because I had no formal training. I barely got through high school English. I can't conjugate a sentence to this day. But what I did was I picked 5 or 6 writers whose work I admired and I read their books and I tore them apart page by page. I read each paragraph, I read each sentence. I took words out, I put words in. I spent a year doing this until I realized what worked for me and what didn't work, and that's how I taught myself how to write, and I've been fairly successful ever since then.
Who are some of those authors?
Pardon me?
Who are some of those authors?
Bruce Chatwin, Lawrence Millman, Tim Cahill, Beryl Markham, and my all-time favorite is Mark Twain. He was the greatest travel writer who ever lived.
And
Love
he did
his work.
audio talks that took people on adventure.
Yes, he did. Looks like that's it. And if
Okay.
it is, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. Appreciate you coming out tonight. Great talk.
Appreciate you guys having me back here. And now I want everybody to come back there and spend a lot of money on my books.
So for those of you still hanging in with us, don't forget you can tune in every Thursday night and see a YouTube broadcast like this. Better yet, we're in Los Angeles. Come down to the club, have dinner, meet some people in person, share some great stories. Every Thursday night, Adventures Club of Los Angeles. Check us out. Have a great night.
And real quick, before everybody gets going, we have a token of our appreciation here for Jim.
Before you drink the coffee and eat the cookies in the dining room, we have to honor our speaker.
So, Jim, I'm sure you have no shortage of these at your house. You know, you probably got a whole room of them. But we have a token of our appreciation to you for coming to share your stories with us tonight. Expressing grateful appreciation to Jim Dorsey for the interesting